All right, guys, so in this section, we're going to talk about systems of inequalities. So in section 5.6, we talked about graphing linear inequalities with the dotted lines and the shade above or shaded below. Um, Today, we're going to basically do two or more of those inequalities on the same graph. It's called a system of inequalities. So basically, we're merging together section 5.6 with section 6.1. So what you need to know is a system of inequalities is a set of two or more linear inequalities containing two or more variables. And the solutions, and the key letter there is S, there could be multiple solutions. The solutions of a system of linear inequalities are all the ordered pairs that make the inequalities true. Okay, so basically it's the exact same thing we talked about in section 5.6, but we're doing two different inequalities, linear inequalities, on the same grid. And our answer is going to be the overlap between the shaded areas. Okay, so let's just cross through some examples, and I think it'll start to make more sense. Something I might advise doing here is it might be useful to have multiple colors, and you'll see why in a second. So it says graph the system of linear inequalities, and they're going to be two linear equations. They're going to be y is less than or equal to x plus 1, and y is greater than negative 2x minus 3. Okay. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm just going to start by graphing this first inequality in blue. Y is less than or equal to x plus 1. So I ask myself this question. Is it dotted or is it solid? We have a line underneath, so it's going to be solid. Am I going to shade above or below? My alligator's eating the right, so I'm going to shade below. Okay. Once I have those two pieces of information, I basically just graph it like any other slope-intercept equation. So my y-intercept is positive 1, my p-value is 1. And based on what I'm seeing right here, my slope is going to be 1. So I go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. In both directions, I could easily go down 1 over 1 to the left, and I'll notice I'll have a perfect line. Okay, so when I connect these dots, it should look something like this. Okay, so I have a solid line because my inequality is less than or equal to, and I'm going to shade below this line. So I'm going to color it in right around here. Okay, any part that is underneath that blue line. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph the other equation, the other inequality, on the exact same grid. But I'll change the colors. I'll go to red or this red color. So I'm looking at y is greater than negative 2x minus 3. So before I graph it, let me just ask myself this question. Is it solid or is it dotted? Okay, I don't see a line underneath that inequality symbol, so it's going to be dotted or dashed. And am I going to shade above or below? Okay, it's opening to the left, so I'm going to shade above. So let's graph it. Okay, it's a little difficult to see because we got the blue blob underneath this blue line, but let's try to graph it. My y-intercept is going to be negative 3, which is way down here. And it looks like my slope is negative 2. So from this point, I should go, my rise is negative 2, so I go down 2, 1, 2, over 1 to the right. Down 2, over 1. I could easily go also up 2, 1, 2, over 1 to the left. Up 2, 1, 2, over 1 to the left. Okay, so when I connect these dots, I got to make sure that I'm using a dotted line or a dashed line. And it should look something like that. And the final step is I got to get the shade. So the shade is going to be anything that's above this dotted line, which would be pretty much this entire area up here. Okay, but here's what's important to understand. My solution is only the places where the shades collide. So I'm going to switch to a third color here. Let's call it this yellow or the gold. The only place where these shades collide is in this sector right here, above the red line, but below the blue line. This is my sweet spot right here where the shades collide. So it looks super messy, But the only place where both of my requirements are met, where it's above the red line but below the blue line, is in this yellow area right here. Okay, so that's why it's super useful to use a bunch of colors. Up here would not work because it doesn't meet the requirement for the blue line, and down here wouldn't work because it doesn't meet the requirement for the red line. The only place where it meets both requirements is in this gold area right here. So that's why using multiple colors can really help you to help stay organized. Let's do another one. I'll use this turquoise color now. So y is greater than x minus 5. Right off the bat, let's talk about dotted versus solid. No line underneath, so x minus 5 is going to be a dotted line. Above or below, the alligator's eating the left, so it should be above. Where's my y-intercept at? My y-intercept's at -5, so it's way down here. And my slope is my number in front of my x term. There's no number, but I imagine it's a 1, so my m is equal to 1, which means I go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1 forever and ever. And when I connect the dots, I got to make sure it's a dotted line. Should look something like that. Ask myself, where's the shade? And it's anything above this turquoise dotted line. I'll try to be a little bit lighter here. It's going to be anything in this area right here. Anything above that turquoise dotted line. Okay, do the exact same thing for the second equation. Before we do any sort of graphing, ask yourself, is it dotted or is it solid? This should be a solid line based on inequality. And it's going to be below because my alligator is eating the right side. It's less than or equal to. So let's graph it. My y-intercept is +2, way up here. And then my slope is 1 over 2. So from this point, I'm going to go up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2. I could also easily go down 1 over 2 to the left. And when I connect my dots, it should be a nice solid line. Something like that. Okay, so once again, I'm going to shade everything below this blue line, and it should look something like this. Pretty messy. And the shade does go down here as well. But remember, what is my sweet spot? My sweet spot is only the place where the shades align. Anything that's underneath the blue line, switch to red now. Anything that's underneath the blue line, but above the turquoise line. This is my sweet spot right here. So I'll make this super, super clear. Kind of messy. But any point that falls in this red shaded area over here qualifies as my solution. So super important, try to use colors. Try to stay a little bit more organized. It's a little bit more difficult on the electronic version because it doesn't blend as nicely. But shade lightly so you can clearly see where your sectors or where your shade